Hey guys, this is Mitch with FindPoint CGI, and today we're going to be building an add-on for Godot that integrates Open AI's API into Godot. So it's going to be really cool because it's going to give us a tool that allows us to comment our code automatically by clicking a summarize button. It's going to allow us to do actions on code and say, build this thing or refactor this thing or something like that. And it'll do it inside of our actual editor for us. And it's going to come and help us out. If we select code and click the help button, it'll pop up with some help text that will help us out. And finally, it's going to give us the ability to have a chat box so that way we can talk back and forth with the Open AI API and actually have it answer questions for us all within the Godot editor. So that's what I have in store for you guys today. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is we need to actually get our API key. Now, if you've never used OpenAI's API, you need to make an account. So make sure you go to platform.openapi.com, create an account, sign into that account, and then you will see this screen. I don't really want to go through that whole process just because there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of personal details there. So I'm just going to start from right here. So first we need to get our API key. So if you come up here to your personal section here, you click on that and you come down here to view API keys. Now you'll see that I have a bunch of keys here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new secret key. I'm going to grab this key and I'm going to copy it. And I'll just hold on to this key for right now until we get into Godot. Now, the other important thing that we need to make sure that we have set up is we have set up our billing, and make sure you set up a payment method and actually have a payment attached to this, because if you don't, it won't work. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hold on a minute. I have to pay to use GPT when ChatGPT is free. Yes, that's the case. And the reason why is because you're guaranteed availability because you're considered a business and you get a lot more comprehensive answers. So one of the things that ChatGPT is kind of bad at is it tries to give you a concise but not concise answer. And it's limited to about 1,000 tokens. Whereas with this, we can get basically unlimited amount of tokens that we want. We could just tell it that we have a limit of this amount of tokens, and it will actually write up until those tokens are expired. So it's a lot more useful, if that makes sense. Now, once you have this set up, you have your API key created right here, then you're ready to jump into Godot. So let's jump into Godot and let's code this add-on. All right, so the first thing we have to do is we need to actually set up this add-on. And what we'll do is we'll come up to project settings. We'll come into here and we will go into our plugins and we'll create a new plugin and we will call it Godot GPT integration. And the subfolder is going to be res fp/GPT integration. Like that. Description, I'm not going to worry about it. Author will be FindPoint CGI. And I don't think it likes my name. Let me see. Can I do... So it looks like we'll just have to use GPT integration. Version will be 1.0. Language is going to be GD script. You could do this in C#. The only downside to doing it in C# is that if they don't have the mono version of Godot, then they can't use your add-on. So a lot of times when I'm coding plugins, I code them in GD script because it makes things easier for everyone else. And I will click create. Now this is going to create an editor plugin. And editor plugins are basically stuff that runs during editor time, and it allows you to extend the editor itself. Now we need to put some variables up here. Now I already know what I'm building because I already pre-built this. Normally I try not to do that, but in this case, I pre-built all this to make it a lot easier and a lot easier to follow. So first we'll build an enum. And what this is going to be is it's going to be our modes of our actual plugin. And I'm going to have an action mode. I'm going to have a summarize mode. I'm going to have a chat mode, and I'm going to have a help mode like that. And we're going to have a var API key, and we're going to make that equal to our API key. Now, this API key is going to be invalid, so if you guys try to use it, it's not going to work. So you're going to need your own API key to do this. Then we're going to need to have some kind of prompt. So we'll say var prompt. We're going to make that hello world, which is the standard prompt that most people do. Then we're going to need a max tokens. We'll make that equal to 1024. And then we need a temperature. And we'll make that equal to 0.5. Now, max tokens is the number of tokens you're allowed. Temperature is how well it adheres to what you're trying to get it to do. So for instance, if you were to say, I need you to write a function that validates emails, it'll write a function that validates emails. If you say, I want to write a function that validates emails with regex, it will use regex to validate those emails. Whereas if you were to say, write me a story, you'd want your temperature to be a bit higher. It would allow it to get more creativity flowing, if that makes sense. Next, we're going to need a URL. And in our case, we're going to use the HTTPS API URL. So https://api.openapi.com/v1/completions. And then we're going to add in our headers. And our headers are going to be content-type : application/JSON, comma, quote, authorization bearer space, and we're going to pass in our API key. Just like that. And then our last one will be our engine. Now we're going to come back up here, definitely, because we're going to need to add additional stuff. Like when we create our doc, we create our stuff. We'll definitely need to come back up here. But for right now, this is what we're going to have. So we'll type text-DaVinci-003. Then we need to actually set up our enter tree and exit tree. So our enter tree and exit tree is where our code actually gets kind of set up. So enter tree allows you to initialize the plugin. Exit tree allows you to clean up the plugin. And what we'll do is we're going to create a scene that will actually basically hold all of our information. So if we head over to user interface, we go to 2D, right click, let's add in a child node, let's add in a rich text label. We're going to make it full rect like that. And we're going to pull this guy up just a tiny bit. So this is going to be a chat box. I'm going to make it about yay big. And then we're going to right click our control node. We're going to add in another node. We'll add in a button like so. And I'm going to snap this guy to the bottom right like so. And I will make it, I don't know, about this big, give or take. If we take a look at our rich text label versus our button, we can kind of pull this guy up a tiny bit. We'll make it about this big, give or take, and we'll just type chat like so. We'll right click, add another child node, add in a text edit node, and we'll snap that guy down to the bottom right. We're going to make it about this big, give or take, and we'll pull this guy up here like this. And for right now, that's what we need. Although, technically speaking, we're going to want to add additional buttons. So while we're in here, let's just do that. So we'll add in a HBox container. We're going to snap that guy to the full bottom of the screen. We'll make it about, I don't know, about this big, give or take. We're going to right click, add a child node. We'll add in a button, and then we will duplicate that button 3 times. We're going to name the first one summary. We're going to make the next one action. We're going to make the third one help. And I will adjust the text accordingly. So help, action, and summary. And then we'll select these guys. We'll go into Godot here. We'll go to layout, container sizing, and we'll expand to fit our actual width of this guy. And we'll pull both of these guys down so that way they kind of match with what we're doing. And I'm going to grab, actually, I'm going to grab both of these guys. I'm going to actually pull them back up. I think it would be better off if we just expand the size of our chat and our text edit. That way you have the ability to type more text and it's not going to cause some problems here. And then, of course, we're going to keep our text label right here like this. And if we really want to be fancy, we can add an H separator and just kind of pull this guy like so, and pull it down right here, just to add a little bit of separator there to make it look a little bit better. Though we don't have to do that. It probably isn't worth having, but I'm going to put it there for funsies and we'll go from there. And there we go. Now we're going to need to adjust the sizing of some of these things. You can see we have this pinned on the left, this guy pinned on the right. We do want this guy to scale, so we'll just drag this guy out like this, and that will help scale this so that it matches with our scene. I'm going to keep this guy. I'm going to also click this guy. I'm going to drag this guy like this, and our rich text label is already set up properly. I'm going to hit Control S, go into my add-ons, GPT integration, and I'm going to call this chat.tscn. I'm going to change the name of my control to chat as well, and I will save it. Now, this is important because it does set your tab's name, so it's important to make sure that it is correct. Now, once we have this, we can go into our script and we can actually start coding this up. And I know that that was a big detour, but we kind of have to build our environment up so we can get this thing going. So first, what we have to do is we need to make a variable for our object to exist. So I'm going to come up here and say var chat doc, and I'll come down here and I'll say chat doc is equal to preload chat.tscn dot instantiate, and that's going to instantiate our object. And then we need to add our control. So we can add control to various things here. So you can see we have add to bottom panel. That's this bottom panel here. Add to container. That's this container here. Add to doc. That's these left and right docs. In my case, I'm going to do doc because that's the one that I feel is the most useful for this. And I get to pick where I want it to be. So you could choose pretty much anywhere, but what I'm going to choose is the doc left. So over here, upper right, which is this spot here. Upper left is over here. It'll create basically a new section right here. So I'm going to put one in the upper right here on the left side. And then once we have that, we can basically start hooking up whatever it is that we need to do. And then we just have to hit comma chat doc, and that will shove our chat doc into this spot. So if I hit Control S, I go to my project settings, I disable and enable my plugin. You will see if I click on chat, we have ourselves a chat window. Now it's not perfect because for whatever reason, this guy's a little bit scaled wonky. You can see how these guys are scaling kind of wonky. So I wonder if we come in here, and I was hoping to avoid this because I always run into problems with this. Let me bring this guy down and like that. And then let me grab this guy and pull this up like that. Hopefully that'll fix it. Go to project settings, disable, enable. And you'll see that we have a mistake. Well, now we have two of these guys. So what happened? Here's one, here's two. Well, this one's also wrong, by the way. If you look at it, it's terrible. But why did this do this? The reason why is because we are not cleaning up after our doc. You can see we're adding it. We're actually not removing it. So you have to make sure that when you do this, you actually delete the doc when you're done. And the way to do that is when you exit your tree right here. You need to clean that doc up. So first you have to remove it. So remove control from docs, and you could pass in your doc like that. And then you can queue free like that. And that'll basically remove it. Now, unfortunately, we will always have these two guys here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to reset Godot. So I'm going to be right back because you have to reset Godot for this, for it to clear out these two chat panels. So I will close Godot and be right back. Okay, so if we look at our chat, you'll see that our chat's all messed up, but at least we only have one, so that's good. Now, if we come here and we take a look at these, I always struggle really hard with getting this to scale properly. So I wonder if I bring these guys like this, I hit Control A, project settings, plugins, I disable it. You'll notice that my chat got removed. and re-enable it. And then we come here. That's a lot closer to what I was looking for. Unfortunately, it's still not perfect, but it's a lot closer. That text is still very much wrong. If I pull this guy over, you'll see why. It's kind of scaling it quite drastically. So if we select our text edit, if we drag this to here, what does that do? Let's see. If we drag this guy over, that's a lot better. It is overlapping, but it's way more reasonable than what it was. So I wonder if I grab my text edit, I drag this over just a touch, and I pull this like that. That's a lot closer to what I was looking for. So that should work about perfectly. And we'll do the same thing for our H separator. I'll just drag this all the way across. And then if I click and I drag this, there we go. And if I make this smaller like this, you'll see that it handles it quite well as well, other than my separator not working properly. So if I pull this guy down and then I change my chat size, that should hopefully do it. Well, see, and my separator still doesn't want to work. So I think I'll just get rid of that. I never find those useful anyway, so it's totally fine to get rid of it. But I think that that will work. If I click on my rich text label, yeah, that looks like that's going to work. So we're going to save this guy, Control S. We'll go into our project settings, disable, enable, close, and there we go. We have ourselves a nice chat box that's set up for our stuff that respects the size of our window, which is exactly what we're looking for. Now, of course, we'll probably have to come in and adjust these sizes to be smaller, or adjust this to be smaller or something, for it to work better for us. But at least we're done with this. So now we can go back to our script and let's talk about how we get these buttons to actually start working. So there's a lot of ways to do it, but the easiest way that I have found in my experience is to just hook them up here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to say chat doc.get node, and you'll see that it shows a bunch of nodes. I'm going to grab my button node and I'm going to hit .connect, and I'm going to connect pressed, comma, and I will hook it up to a function. And in my case, it's going to be on chat button down. I'm going to copy and paste this, I believe 3 more times, and then we're going to hit quote hbox container dot action. We'll grab this, paste, action, help, and then I believe it was summary. There we go. And we will hook up our pressed action to on action button down, on help button down, and on summary button down. What this is going to do is it's going to hook up all of our buttons. And we're going to need to actually declare these functions. So let's come down here and let's declare them. So func on chat button down, like that. And we're going to print chat pressed, like that. And then we'll just copy this guy like so. We're going to hit enter, paste, and I believe that will do it. We're going to change our chat button down to action button down, our help button down to help button, on summary to on summary. And then I will just grab this guy on action, on help, and on summary. And I'm going to hit Control S, project settings, disable, enable, close, click on chat. Let's go to our output, summary, on summary down, action, on action, help, on help, chat, on chat. So now it's literally as simple as just working inside of a regular Godot project. Once you have this stuff set up, it's easy. It's just getting it set up that can be kind of a pain. So once we have this, we just need to basically get our chat to work, okay? So basically, we need to make it so that when we type stuff in here and we click chat, it pops up here, and then it sends it out to OpenAI for it to process it. And thankfully, it's going to be really easy to do. All we need to do is set up an HTTP request node and basically pass it this information. So we'll come up here to our enter and exit tree. We're going to add in a function called _ready, and we will start building out a small ready. So first we'll say var HTTP request is equal to HTTP request dot new, and that's going to create a new instance of that object. Then I'm just going to add a child, and I'm going to add my HTTP request node as a child of my doc. So what you don't see here is that this basically is a node that exists. So think of it kind of like we just instanced this guy in. This script is basically attached to this guy here on its root node. So anything that goes on gets childed to this object. So that's how you can kind of think of it in your memory is basically this is a scene with a script attached to it, more or less. Now, once we have our child added, all we have to do is just connect our request. So HTTP request dot connect quote request underscore completed comma, and I'm going to come down here and just say func on request completed, and I will put that guy down here. Now, the request completed actually has a bunch of objects that come into it, and the easiest way to know that is if you come into your search help and you say on request completed, there should be a HTTP request object. If you take a look at this, there actually is a thing that says signals on request completed, result, response code, header, and body. So we need to make sure that we have that. So we'll come in here and say result, comma, response code, comma, headers, and body, just like that. And then right now we'll just pass. So once we have this connected, we can basically just say on request completed, and then we can set some kind of, and we're going to need to set this as some kind of variable. So we'll just grab this guy, paste it up here, and then we'll just copy, and we'll just get rid of this var like that, and that will do it for us. Now, once we have that ready completed, we're basically done with that section. So thankfully we're good. All we have to do now is basically fire off this request. Now, this is where things are going to get a little bit on the funkier side. So what we'll do is we'll come into our chat button down. Instead of doing a chat pressed, we're just going to come in here and say, okay, if our doc.get node, and we'll pull back our node. So if you look at our scene, we have our chat node right here. So we'll pull back our button, text edit. So we'll say text edit dot text does not equal quote, because if that does equal quote, we don't want to just send empty data to our AI and have our AI say, hey, I don't know what you're trying to have me do, and then waste valuable tokens and waste valuable money. So we'll do this and we'll say, hey, if it's not equal to nothing, then let's chat. Okay. So first we need to set our mode to chat. So we'll come in here and create a variable for that. So we'll say var current mode, and we'll come down here and say current mode is equal to modes.chat. That way we know it's a chat that we're doing. Then we're going to set up our prompt. So var prompt is equal to doc.getNode quote text edit dot text. Then we will actually set our doc dot text equal to empty because we want to empty it for them. And then we're going to want to add it to our actual chat box. So when you type in here and you hit enter or click on the chat button, you're going to want to actually say, hey, I was saying something or I did something. Now, we can do this in a lot of ways, but the easiest way is to basically just say doc.get underscore node quote, and I believe we called it rich text label. So rich text label dot text plus equals our prompt. And if we do this, this is great, but we need to actually, instead of doc, we're going to need to do chat doc. I believe it's chat doc, not doc. There we go. And instead of doing our prompt like this, we need to actually come in and add in /n. And what that's going to do is that's going to force a new line. And then we're going to do the same thing, Control C plus new line. And that's just going to give us a little bit of additional spacing so that way we can actually see what's going on here. Now you'll notice identifier doc is not declared. That's my fault, so we'll paste that. And that should hopefully do it for that. So once we know that we're good and we actually have our information put into that chat and we actually have our stuff ready, now we can actually call out to Open AI. Now, in our case, it's going to be really simple. What we're going to do is we're going to create a function called callGPT, and we're going to put in a prompt like so. And the reason why I'm using callGPT instead of just doing it up here is because if you do it up here, then what's going to happen is you're going to sit here and be reduplicating code, because when we do an action or a help or a summary, we're going to need to call our GPT, right? We're going to need to get whatever's going on, and then we're going to need to actually call out to that. And that's going to be a big thing. So we're going to want to make sure that we just have a function that's set to do this, because it's going to make things easier. So first we'll say var body is equal to JSON dot new dot stringify, and we need to stringify some data. So we'll create a bracket, and then we'll say quote prompt colon prompt. Then we'll say quote temperature colon temperature quote max tokens colon max tokens, and then model. And we're going to hard code this model for now, but we'll probably fix that later. So text DaVinci -003. Then once we have that, we need to actually make our request. So var error is equal to http request.request URL, comma, headers, comma, http client.method post, comma, body. Okay. And what this is doing is we are creating our body. So we're creating our package of data. We're making it in JSON data, which is what APIs use to talk to each other. We're going to pass in our URL, which is up here, which is this URL here. We're going to pass in our headers, which is right here. And then we're going to pass in our method, which is going to be a post method. And in APIs, posting is saying, hey, I'm going to give you some data. I need you to give me some data back. So there's a lot of different methods, but that's the most common one that I use is post or get pretty much. So just remember that generally speaking, you could just use post, though sometimes it depends on what you're trying to do. Then once we have this, it's going to go out, make a request, and we're going to want to check for errors. So if error does not equal okay, then we're going to push an error. And we're going to say something went wrong. And once the request finishes, it's going to come down here and do on request completed. So now here's where the whole state machine actually matters, because how we handle our request really matters with how we handle our stuff. And what I mean by that is, depending on what we're trying to do, we may want to print some data here, or we may want to print some data in our actual code window. So we need to be able to determine which one we're trying to do. Now, in our case, we're doing our chat, so we'll just do our current mode of chat. So we'll say var JSON is equal to JSON.new, like that. And then we'll say JSON.parse body.getString underscore from underscore UTF-8, like that. And then we'll say var response is equal to JSON.getData. And that's going to pull back our data. And then we're going to say, all right, we have our data. What are we going to do with it? Well, let's get our string. So var new str is equal to response dot choices, because I know it's going to come back as choices dot text. And the reason why I'm doing all of this without actually making a request, printing out my data, and basically explaining that is because it costs money every time we do a shootout to ChatGPT. So I don't want to charge you guys money for no reason. So we'll print our response like this. And I know it's going to cost us like a half a penny to do this test, but I just don't want to waste money if we don't have to. So just trust me in how I'm setting this up, and I'll explain how this works once we actually go and test the final completion of this part. But once we have that, all we have to do is check what our mode is, because we have our data. It's right here in new str. But depending on what we're doing with it, if, for instance, we're trying to comment a function, we're going to want to say, okay, we'll append a hashtag in front of it, right? Or if we're trying to add it to our little chat box right over here, then we need to tell it to do that. So we need to check our mode. So if current mode is equal to modes.chat, then we can add it to our chat. Now, if you remember, when we were up here, we actually are adding it to chat like this. Now, we could come in and go, okay, we're going to come in here and add it to chat again and recopy some code. Or we can just set a function to do that. In my case, I'm going to set a function to do that because I'm going to try to make our chatbot a little bit cooler than just, oh, it passes in some text, right? So we'll go add to chat like so, and we will basically just set our text. So we'll come up here to our chat doc rich label text. We'll just grab this bit down here, paste it, and instead of prompt, we'll just pass in text like that. And then we'll come up here where we're doing our chatbot. We will say add to chat like that, and we'll add our prompt to chat like that. And then we can just come in here and say, if our current mode is chat, add to chat, and we'll just pass in our text. So new str, like so. Simple enough. Now, we may want to set up a way for us to know what is GPT and what's not. So we'll just say GPT : space plus new string. And then we're going to want to do the same thing up here because we don't want to, because we want to know who this came from. We should probably put some kind of thing that says like me or user or something like that. So we'll do that like so. All right. Hopefully, if everything's set up correctly, we should be good. Make sure you have your API key set with your API. And if we've done everything correctly, in theory, we should be able to test this and it should work. If we go to project settings, disable, enable, close, chat, we'll type test and we will check for outputs like this. See if we have any issues. Chat. Well, we have invalid index choices on base nil, so that's not a great sign. All right, so I figured out the issue. If we scroll all the way up to the top, it's not Open API, it's Open AI. I don't know how I missed that, but I did finally find it. So we'll go up to our project settings, disable, enable it, click close. We'll clear our little console window here. We'll go to chat, we'll type test, and then click chat, and let's hope it works. It might not be working. Okay, you can see it's processing a request right here. And there we go. Cool, we got something. So if we type hello world chat, let's see if it does anything. Hello and welcome to the world. It is big and exciting place with lots of things to explore and learn. Awesome. So now we have our stuff actually communicating. You can see all the information that comes back here. So how I got to this section here, if I remember, I owe you guys an explanation of how I know its responses choices 0. So if you come in here and you take a look at this JSON that comes back, you can see it says index, log probe, prompt tokens, completion tokens, total tokens, ID, text completion, created, what model I was using, choices, and you can see that it has text. And you'll see that that choice is a list of objects. So what we're doing is we're basically just getting back that first index and we're pulling back .text right here. and then we're getting these guys. So that's basically how we are approaching it. So once we have this, it's really just a matter of building out the rest of these actions. So if you remember at the beginning of the video, you could select a function and actually say summary, and it would summarize what that function does. Now that's going to require a bunch of work because you actually have to get what the user has selected. So what we'll do is we'll come over here and we will come up down here and let's build a function. Now I know that I already have my on summary button pressed, but I want to get what I have selected. And since help and summary and action are all going to require the same functionality, I'm going to make it into a function because it's going to make things a lot easier to work with. So what we'll do is we'll go func get selection like that. And to get what the user has selected, we're going to need to pull back our editor interface. So we'll say var script editor is equal to get editor interface dot get script editor like that. And that's going to pull back our actual script editor. So we get editor interface pulls back our entire editor interface. And then dot script editor gets this little box in here. It pulls back that script editor. Technically, you could say get 3D view or get 2D view and actually pull those back as well if you wanted to. So you could create tools inside of the 3D or 2D view. Now, once we have our script editor, we need to get our current script editor. So we actually have to get the focus of our script editor. So we'll say var current script editor is equal to get script editor dot get current editor, and that's going to pull back our current editor. Technically, if we wanted to, we could just say var current script editor and then just pull back our current editor like that. And that would reduce our stuff down to one line. It's up to you and if you want to do it that way or not. And then we have to pull back our actual editor. So we can actually say var code editor is equal to current script editor dot get base editor. Okay. And then from there, we can pull back our highlighted code. But when we pull back our code, we're going to need to get where our character's position is. So for instance, if I'm here and I want to put code up above it, for instance, for a summary, then that's going to be different than if I want to select a function and say, select a comment and say, code me this, I want that to happen below. So we need to actually check for that. So we're going to come in here and say, if current mode is equal to modes dot summarize, then we're going to actually get our cursor position. So when we get our cursor position, I'm going to want this to be a global variable. So that way we can actually access it somewhere else. So let's say var cursor position. We'll scroll back down and we'll say cursor position is equal to code editor dot get selection underscore from underscore line like that. And that's going to pull back our cursor position. I'm just going to set that up there. And then finally, we're going to return whatever our highlighted code is. So we'll go code editor dot get underscore selected text like that. And that should hopefully pull back whatever we have selected. And now we could just come into our summarize button right here on summary button down. When we press that button, we need to fire off our summary code. So first we'll need to set our actual mode to summary. So we'll say current mode is equal to modes.summarize like that. And then we'll call GPT and then we will tell it what we want it to do. So in my case, I'm going to say summarize, which I need to know how to spell summarize, summarize, this code in GD script. Actually, I think maybe we should use summarize this GD script code. I think that would be a better thing. And then we're going to hit a plus and we will grab our selection. So get selection. And we might want to call this get selected code. Let's do that. That's a little bit better, a little bit more reasonable of a name. And then when we do our request complete, you remember how we got our response and we actually did stuff with it. Well, we have to do the same thing here. We need to actually do something with the response once it's completed, right? Once our request is completed and we actually have our stuff working, we need to do stuff with it. So we'll say else if current mode is equal to modes dot summarize, then we can do some stuff. Now, I'm going to be very particular about how we handle this because I have already checked this out once, so I want to make sure that we do it correctly the first time. So we'll say response dot choices 0 dot text dot replace quote /n with empty. And the reason why I'm doing this is because if you look at our previous one that we did, we got 2 /n's at the beginning of our data. You can see that if we come down here, it said hello world, and then GPT did /n/n/n, hello, welcome to the world. So we want to make sure that we check for that and we actually remove those /n's because they're not needed. And then we're going to say new str is equal to quote ampersand space enter. And what that's going to do is that's going to actually set up a comment on it. That way, when GPT actually writes our stuff, it's going to be commented out. So that way it doesn't affect our code. And we're going to do a little bit more funky processing. Now, this is something that I'm doing specifically because I know how it's going to work. But one of the big problems that GPT has is you can see, hello, welcome to the world. It's big and exciting with lots of things to explore and learn. Well, if we were to put that into a hashtag and we were to go to our output, we were to grab this bit of information here and we were to paste it. So I'll grab this, Control C, click Control V. You can see that it can create some really long bits of words. And we don't really want that when we do comments. It would be really nice if once it gets, 50 characters or 60 characters down, that it just kind of does a carriage return and then continues explaining whatever it is that it's trying to explain. So I'll just say var line length is equal to 50, like so. And then I'll say var current line length is equal to 0, like so. And then I will say for I in range, like this, str.length, like that. And that's going to pull back my actual string's length. And we'll say for every character in there, if current line length is greater than or equal to line length, and our str I is equal to quote space than new str plus equals quote /n for new line ampersand or pound signed. And then we'll reset our current line length. So we'll reset that to 0. Else, we will go ahead and say new str plus equals str I current line is plus equals 1. And I need to fix current like so. Go, and that should fix it. There we are. And that will do it. And then once we're done, we can actually just insert that information. Now, how do we do that, right? What do we do so that we can actually insert that into our code editor? Well, we're going to need to get a reference to what our code editor actually is, and then we'll need to set it. But we don't have a reference to that code editor, right? We did do some kind of reference right here, right? We did a var code editor, but we never actually set it to any kind of value anywhere. So what can we do? Well, we can just copy this guy like so, copy it, get rid of our var like that. We'll scroll up to the top and we'll paste it. And that way it will be set as a global variable, and that'll make things a lot easier. So now we could just say code editor dot insert underscore line underscore at cursor position comma new str, and that's going to actually insert our line at our cursor position, which if you remember is being set right here, get selection from line. So that's how it knows. And now if we hit Control S, we go to project settings, disable, enable, just so I can reset everything. We have a nice clean slate here. Let's see what happens if I select my on request completed code right here. Summary. Let's see what happens. And there you go. It will automatically summarize our code. And you can see exactly what it does. Depending on the current mode of the program, it'll add a response to a chat or summarize it in a code editor. This summarization involves adding a £sign at the beginning of each line, ensuring that no line is longer than 50 characters, which is really amazing and really useful. So now all we have to do is just set up our action and our help functionality. But we have all the basic parts completed for us. And it really is amazing how this works. Now, what I would like to do is I'd like to add a space. Now that I'm looking at the stuff it's doing, I'll add a space right here. So that way, when it does its £, it's gonna space it out somewhat more properly. And I'm not sure why it has that. If I take a look, because I added a space right there. So if I get rid of that and I save it, and then I select this bit of code here, and I run this again, we should probably put some kind of wording or something saying that it's working. But there we go. And that works. Awesome. Cool. So let's build out the rest of our stuff. So we got our help button and we have our action button. So let's do our action button next. Our action button is basically the exact same way, but instead it's just going to pull back it's just going to call GPT to tell it to do an action. So we'll come in here. I'll get rid of this print. I don't think we need it. We'll say call GPT. We're going to quote, and I'm going to say code this in GD script. And I'm going to hit plus, and we will do our get selected code like that. And then I'm going to come down into my get selected code, and I'm going to set above that, I almost forgot, I should set my current mode. So current mode is equal to modes.action like that. And then we're going to need to use this mode as a switch. So we're going to come down into our get selected code, and I believe we're going to need to adjust this a little bit just because of how we're handling our positioning of our code. We're going to need to pull back our current mode, and we're going to need to see if it's a modes.action. And if it is, then instead of getting our selection from line, I believe we'll need to pull back our get selection to line like that. And then for our request completed, we're going to need to make a few small adjustments here. So you can see we're checking if we're summarizing, but we're not summarizing, right? So else if current mode is equal to modes.action, then what are we going to do? Well, basically exactly what this says. So we'll just grab this little bit here, copy it, and paste. And that's pretty much it. Easy enough. So if we come up here, actually, let's go to the bottom so that we don't mess up our code that we currently have. If we type £, space, code on email validation validation script with regex. Like that. Let's select it and click action. And let's see what it does. Well, it kind of did it. It did it in what looks like Python, but it's very close to what we wanted. So that's not bad. I'm curious if it got confused. Let's see. Code this or Godot. Let's see if that works better. We'll come down here. We'll say create an API call. We'll go like this. We'll control S and we'll click action. And let's see if it does it. There we go. That's pretty darn close. That's using Godot. That's using the methods that we're looking for. Awesome. It did do the wrong commenting, but at least it worked. And that's what we were looking for. Awesome. So that functionally works. So that's good. Now we just have to get our help working. So let's come up here and let's set up our help. So we have a on help button down. It's basically going to be the same thing that we just did. So current mode is equal to modes.help, call GPT. And what we'll do is instead of just getting selected code, I'm going to actually show the code here. So let's come up here and let's say var code is equal to get selected code. And that's going to pull back our selected code. And then I'm going to say, I believe we called our doc chat doc. So chat doc dot get node. And we're going to pull back our text edit like that. Dot text. And we're going to make that equal to nothing. So that way it just kind of clears this out. And then we are going to add our text to our chat. So add to chat and we'll pass in some text. So we'll say me colon space plus what is wrong with this code? And I think we should probably call out GD script code. And we will add our code in. And that's going to add that to this chat here. And then we're going to say call GPT. And we'll just basically grab this bit of information here. Honestly, we could just grab all of this. We'll just copy it. We'll paste that in like this. And there we go. So now all we have to do is set up our help functionality within our request completed. So we'll come down here and we'll say else if current mode is equal to modes.help colon enter. And what we'll do is we'll say add to chat quote GPT colon space plus response dot choices 0 dot text. And that should just work if we're done correctly, hopefully. So let's save that. Let's come down here and let's just create a quick little broken function. So we'll say func test and we'll say if we'll pass in a t if t is equal to empty, right? So we're missing, the issue is going to be that we're missing this after the operator. T dot text is equal to quote, and then we will return Y. And let's see what happens if we do that. So we'll select this, help. What is wrong with this code? This code is missing an opening bracket for the if statement. It is missing a closing bracket for the function. Additionally, it's missing variable Y, which is not defined. The correct code should look like this, which technically it didn't actually fix the Y part, but at least it gave us an idea of what it does. So awesome. That basically is what we were trying to get out of it. So now we have a way to ask questions. So how would I change my font size in Godot editor. We can chat with it like this, and it'll actually give us answers. How would I change font size? To change font size, go to Edit, Editor Settings, and then under the text edit, you can adjust the font size, which is actually quite accurate. It's right here, main font size and code font size. So perfect. It's like having a little help desk here. The only thing I think would be useful is having a settings menu, because right now we have to set all of our stuff here, and it'd be really nice to be able to change our max tokens and our temperature and stuff like that from an actual settings menu. So let's do that. So how do we add a settings menu? In theory, it sounds really easy, right? You're just kind of saying, okay, well, let's create a button over here that we can click on or something like that. But what if we wanted to actually add it up here so that way it actually works like a regular thing? Well, that's where project tools comes in. You're actually able to come into here and add stuff to this area. So how do we do that? Well, if we come to our enter tree, we can actually set it up so that it builds out a button for that. So if we come in here, we can actually add what's called a tool menu item. So we can type add tool menu item, and we can pass in a name. So let's call it GPT chat. And then we could set in some kind of function call. So we'll say on show settings like that. And then just for sake of brevity, I'll come down here and just say func show settings. And actually, I think I should probably stick with the on show settings. That way it helps with keeping that naming convention going. And once we have that, now we can basically show a settings menu of some kind. We can actually run some code. Now, in our case, we actually don't have any scene built for this. So let's go to scene, new scene, and let's create a user interface. Go to 2D here, and let's actually build out this user interface. Now, I want this to be a pop-up window. So how do we do a good, solid pop-up window inside of Godot? Well, the best way is to use the window node. So let's right-click our child node. Let's change its type to window, like that. And then let's click on here. Let's go to title and say GPT settings, like that. Let's set our size to something, medium, large, something like this, maybe. I don't quite know how much space we're going to need, but we might need a few. So we'll double click on our control node, change this to window. We're going to right click on it, add in a child node, and add in an H box container, because a settings menu usually has your words on one side and the settings on the other. So that's what I'm going to model here. We're going to right click that. We're going to add in a V box container, and then we'll duplicate that V box container. We're going to right click, add in a child node, and let's add in a label. And this label is going to have our actual information. So we'll options text. So we'll say API key. We'll grab this guy, duplicate it, 3 or 4 times. I think if I remember correctly, if we look at the code, we have API key, token, temperature, and engine, it looks like. So that's what we will do. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have API key, not with a U. We have max tokens, and I'll just grab that. Control V. I'll grab this guy, do temperature. We'll copy that, paste it, and then finally we will do engine, and we'll just put engine like that. And now if we look at this, you'll see we have our 4 options. And then if we go into our VBox container number 2, we can add in our line edit like that. And we could just take this guy, duplicate it 4 times. Well, technically 3, because our engine's going to need to have a options menu like that, because it's different. The way it handles it is going to be different. And now we can basically take these guys, API key, max tokens, and in our case, we're going to default it to 1024. Temperature, like that. And then we're going to pass in text of 0.5. And then for our engine, we're only going to have one, which is the DaVinci text like that. And that will be our selected one like that. Now we may add other ones later, but for right now, I think that that will do. I'm going to click on HBox container and I am going to expand it so that it fits everything. So it's full rect. We're going to grab our VBox and we will expand it as well and do the same thing with our other one. I think we have to, let's see. We select our layout. There we go. We can fill this guy. I don't think we want to expand our vertical necessarily. And this one, we can just fill this as well. Maybe we should just take this guy, not expand. Yeah, that looks a lot better. And then we can take this HBox container and we could probably fill it maybe. I don't know if I want to do that. I don't think it really matters. I think we're good. And then we can right click our VBox container on the right side, add in a control node like so, and then add in a button like that. And we can just say, okay. And we can click on this button here and we can put it on the lower right. Or maybe we'll put it, I don't think a full rect is a good idea, but maybe we could put it, I don't want to put it in my HBox container because that would be bad. We could put it on our window maybe. Let's try that. We put it on the window and we lock it to the bottom of the window. Would that be better? Let's see. If we click on our control and we do full rect bottom, then click on our button and connect it full rect like that. Is that going to be better off? I don't really like it. Let me see. We set this up a tiny bit. And then we adjust the size of our window. Is that going to be acceptable? I think so. So we'll just make our size of our window down to about this big. And we'll hit Control S. We'll go into add-ons, GPT integration, and we'll just call it settings window.tscn. And we'll go back to our script. So now we have our settings window actually set up. And then we scroll down here, we can actually just start instancing our settings menu. So we'll come in here and we'll just get a reference to it. So first, I'm going to do what I did with my code editor and other things in my doc. I'm going to come up here and set an actual variable for it. So var settings menu. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to say settings menu is equal to preload. And I'm going to preload my settings window.tscn dot instantiate, and then I'm going to connect my settings button. So you saw we have a button right here. So settings menu dot get node. We're going to grab that control dot button dot connect, and we're going to connect pressed comma, and I will press in on settings button down. We'll copy this guy. We'll come down here. And we'll just quickly make that function. So func on settings button down like that. And this is where we'll save our settings. So we'll just say pass. And then all we have to do is set our settings. Now I'm going to create a function for this because I don't want to have to do this multiple times I don't want to have to refactor my code. So I'm going to put set settings like this. I'm going to pass in an API key. I'm going to pass in my max tokens. I'm going to pass in my temperature and my engine like that. And then I'm just going to say settings.getNode. And I will pass in and then I will say settings menu.getNode. And I'm going to pull back, if I remember correctly, it's HBox container and then VBox container. So HBox container / VBox container / and I will pass in my API key dot text is equal to API key. And then I'm going to copy this. I will paste it 3 times, and I will just come in here and say, instead of API key, we'll do max tokens, and we'll do temperature, which I think I spelled wrong. TMPATRE, temperature. That's definitely spelled wrong. How about we just grab this one and we spell it correctly? There we go. We'll paste that guy in, and then we can basically set this to our max tokens and our temp. And since this is an options menu, we need to basically set it up so that our system knows what our option is going to be. So I'll come in here and I'll say var ID is equal to 0. And I will say if engine is equal to text dash DaVinci dash 003, then our ID is equal to 0. And then we will say settings menu dot get node. We'll just grab this guy dot get node dot options button. And I'm just going to dot select, and I'm going to select my ID. And there we go. And that'll basically just set up my settings menu. So that way, when I open it at first, it's going to actually set that settings menu. And now we could just say set settings, and we'll pass in our API key, comma, int max tokens, comma, float temperature, comma, engine, like that. And then we need to add it as our child. So we'll add child settings menu, and that's going to add it to the child of this chat object. But since it's a window, it's going to pop up by itself. So we actually don't have to worry about that. To get our close to work, so when you click on the little close button, the little X in Windows where it closes your stuff, it actually has an event for that. So we have to make sure we use that event. So we'll say settings menu dot connect, and anytime a close is requested, we'll just close our settings menu. Settings menu close, and I will create a function for that as well. And there we go. And then finally, we can pop it up. So we can say settings menu dot pop up. And there we go. Our settings menu will now pop up, and we can actually click on our button, our settings button down. And as soon as we hook that up, we should be good to go. So when our settings button is down, let's basically do what we're doing here. So let's just copy this guy here, but we're just going to do it in reverse. So we'll just copy all of this code like so. We'll paste it. I'll just get rid of this guy. I'll come to the front and I'll type API key is equal to settings menu, max tokens is equal to settings menu. And we're going to want to make sure that we actually cast our tokens as an integer. So let's come to the front here and we'll cast this guy as an int. Because if you don't cast it as an int, it's going to break a lot of things. So we want to make sure that we do that. Temperature is equal to this, and then float, we'll set that so that's a float value because it needs to be a float for it to be proper. And we'll get rid of that. And then finally, we need to actually check what our text is for our settings menu. So we'll grab this guy, we'll Control C, we'll come in here, we'll get our selected, and then we'll come in here and say if, and we'll pass this as index, and we'll say if our index is equal to 0, then we know that our engine is equal to text dash DaVinci dash 003, and we will get rid of that settings menu piece there. And then we're just going to pass in settings menu close like that. And then in here, we'll just go settings.q free. And there we go. That would be settings menu queue free. And there we go. Now, if we wanted to, we could make it so that when you click on the X, it just automatically saves your settings. It's up to you. A lot of times I like to give the users the option to delete it without clicking OK. So that way it doesn't save their settings. It's up to you guys on which one you want to do. But if you want to make it so it saves automatically, you could just change this to on settings button down. And in theory, that should work. So now if we save this, we go to editor, we go to project, project settings, disable, enable, close, project. You can see our chat is here. Go to project, tools, GPT chat. We click on it and there is our stuff. Now you can see my API key did not come through. Max tokens did and DaVinci text did. We click OK. We're not getting anything good out of it. Invalid text on base nil. So my guess is I made a mistake somewhere. So let's scroll up to the top. It's API key. So let's see if we go to set settings, API key. I did not capitalize my K, API key. I'm going to guess max tokens. Let me see. And then temperature. API key, max tokens, temperature. So that should work. And I don't like where it showed up, so we might need to look at that. But this does work. If I hit close, it does close. So at least there's that. My API key did not get set. I'm not sure why though. Relative to root window, invalid get index. HBox container. Did I spell HBox container wrong? No. VBox container 2. That's my fault. We'll put those 2s in there. We'll do the same thing down here. There we go. Project, project settings, enable, disable. And then we have our chat, project, tools, GPT chat, and it's got all of our information. Now you will notice that if I resize this a tiny bit, you will notice that we have 2 GPT chats. That's because we need to clean up after ourselves. So if we go to where we are adding it, let's see, enter tree, add tool item menu. Let's go ahead and remove tool item menu. So we'll come to our exit tree and we will remove tool menu item. And I believe we named it, if I paste it, GPT chat. So we'll just grab this, remove it. Whoops. Like that. And that will remove it from memory. So that way it's no longer there. Now, unfortunately, we do have an extra one, but that's just going to be the nature of it. And if we go and fix that pop-up issue, so if we come in here, go into our settings window, go to 2D, select our window, we can change where it pops up. So if we come here, we can scroll up, window, windowed, initial position, main window screen center. I think that will work better. We save this, we can close it. Project, project settings, disable, enable, project, tools. You'll see we have 2 GPT chats. Let's click the second one and you'll see it pops up in the center. Perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. Now we have one last thing that we need to do. Now I know most of you probably have tuned out, but we need the ability to actually save our settings because right now we have the ability to set them, but we don't have the ability to save them. And that's going to really suck when I pull my API key out and you guys don't have an API key by default. Every time you open up your project, you're going to have to re-add that API key in, or you're going to have to go into my code and actually adjust it. And I don't want to do that to you guys. So how do we make it so our stuff can save? Well, that's actually a lot easier than you might be thinking. To save, all we have to do is say func save settings. And then we just have to define our data. So var data is equal to, and I'm going to say API underscore key, colon API key, comma, max underscore tokens. And I'm going to use max underscore tokens. Temperature, I'm going to say is temperature. Oh, I missed my comma. So comma, temperature, comma, And then finally, quote, engine, engine, like that. And then we need to convert our data into something that we can write to text, write to a file. So we can just basically convert it to JSON. So var JSON str is equal to JSON dot stringify, and we'll pass in our data. And then we can basically just write it to a file. So var file is equal to file access dot open, and we'll have to come up with a location. And in my case, I'm going to use res//addons/ GPT integration. So we'll rename, copy, grab that GPT integration / settings.json, comma, file access dot write, like that. And then we have to store our data. So file.store _ string JSON str. And then we could just close our string. And then the exact same thing can happen when we load. So func load settings, like that. And we do the exact same thing, but the opposite. So var file is equal to file access dot open. And we're going to pass in our path. So we already have our path right here. So let's just grab this bit here. We'll copy it and paste. And instead of file access dot write, we'll do dot read. And that's going to pull back our file text, right? So var JSON str is equal to file dot get as text, like that. And then we can close our file. So file.close. And then we could say var data is equal to JSON.parse string, and we can pass in our JSON string. And then finally, we can set our values. API key is equal to data API _ key, like that. Then we could say max tokens is equal to int data max _ tokens. Then we could say temperature is equal to float data temperature. And then finally, we can say engine is equal to data quote engine. And there we go. Now all we got to do is hook these guys up. Now I have a capital L, so I'm going to do a lowercase l so that it keeps with my naming convention here. And then I'm going to grab save settings. So when we exit our tree, so when we close Godot or disable the add-on, it's going to save the settings. And then when we enter our tree, it's going to load the settings, like that. And that's basically how we can save and load our stuff. Project settings, and we take a look at our GPT integration right here. I disable, I enable, I close. Did we get any errors? Trying to advance past the stream, so that's not a good sign. We don't have any data here, so that's not great. Invalid set index. Hold on, we'll refresh this. Project settings, disable, enable. We got nothing. What if we open in File Manager? Did it make a JSON file? It did, and it stored our data. So there it is. So everything loads and saves correctly. Perfect. So now you guys have an add-on that can literally interact with GPT and can help you guys with your coding. So in this video, we basically learned how to interact with OpenAI using HTTP calls. We talked about how to actually query data and pull data from your editor. We talked about how to actually save and load settings and things like that. And finally, we made a really cool add-on for Godot. So if you like this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Hey, you know, if you dislike this video, go ahead and hit that dislike button because I'm here to make content for you guys. This video was not quite a viewer suggested video, but it was something that one of my friends suggested I should make. So it was kind of a viewer suggestion. So if you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comments below and I'll be more than happy to build whatever you guys think would be cool. And hey, if you guys have any questions or comments about this add-on or about any of my tutorials that I've done, leave them in the comments below or jump on my Discord, link is in the description, and I'll be more than happy to help you out or talk with you about really anything. But that is all I have for you guys today. So thank you so much again for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Thanks.